It seemed that after he was shot at the border or at a checkpoint, he took out a map with 4 directions and then showed it to everyone. It would seem that it would be impossible to surpass this, but no. Still, Lukashenko seems to be moving forward, and this time he explained why he allowed Russian troops to attack Ukrainian territory. Lukashenko was asked why he allowed Russian troops to pass through Belarus. He replied, "We were having exercises, and Putin started withdrawing troops from the south of Belarus past the border with Ukraine."
Він каже, звідки ви знаєте, що я надавав дозвіл на використання території Білорусі? У нас були навчання російських військ. Путін почав виводити ці війська з Білорусі. Вони були на півдні Білорусі. І цією дорогою повз кордон з Україною він почав...
Some of the troops were provoked at some point, and I am convinced of that. And that is how Russian troops ended up on the territory of Ukraine.
І, відповідно, таким чином російські війська опинилися на території України.
Lukashenko is not to blame. It was a provocation. This is Lukashenko's opinion. There seem to be many topics to discuss, such as the BRICS summit and NATO. But the BBC decided to interview Lukashenko. Mykhailo Podolyak is in touch with us. Mykhailo, congratulations. Congratulations. I'm once again convinced that you shouldn't read newspapers before lunch. Whatever they are and whose they are, you started today, which is very good, because we almost never start programs with anecdotes. Lukashenko comments anecdotally. What is a provocation? Troops along the border are not a provocation. We live in the 21st century and he is still in the 80s, so he is talking nonsense.
Тобто ми з вами маємо сьогодні, ми ж в 21 сторіччі живемо, просто ця людина живе десь там, як залишився в совхозі під назвою Городець, де він там 2 роки працював, він там і залишився, це там в 80-ті роки минулого сторіччя. І тому він говорить якусь маячню. Тобто в нас...
In the 21st century, there are no facts of provocations or shots fired at Russian troops. This is complete nonsense. An interview with the BBC is one thing, but answering questions as part of a legal investigation is another. This is assistance to a country that was preparing aggression and has a different legal status. Lukashenko's testimony would be interesting to read, but he would be careful to comment. His statements do not influence the situation or decisions, even for Russia, because he is not considered an independent entity.
Вони, по-перше, на ситуацію не впливають, по-друге, не впливають на ті чи інші рішення, які будуть приймати сторони, включно навіть з Росією, тому що вони не вважають його за самостійного суб'єкта, навіть в рамках союзної держави, так званої. Взагалі на хід війни, на
In general, this also has no impact on the course of the war and the post-war future. That is, there is a person who actually has no influence on anything. His statements have no factual basis. To be honest, we should take him as a stand-up comedy character. Nothing more, but nothing less. That's why we take any statements made by Lukashenko with a grain of salt. I emphasize once again that they have no value. They do not characterize the moment as such, and they do not speak about what will happen next in this war and what the legal consequences will be, including for Belarus. Of course, this person does not fully understand, and so we calmly put it aside. Let's talk about something else. In any case, to summarize briefly, no one doubts this today. The question is different. The question is political will. There is no doubt that Russia's aggression is a crime that has led to thousands of war crimes. We are calm about the propagandist statements and are working on explaining to the democratic coalition. If you don't learn how to win wars, you will not win.
Демократичному альянсу, демократичній коаліції, що якщо ви не навчитесь завершувати війну на свою користь, ви будете завжди аутсайдерами програвати і
Democracy's leadership will end in defeat.
партії закінчиться фундаментальною поразкою.
The story is strange. When Skabieva interviews Lukashenko, it's one story, they speak the same fictional language. But when the BBC talks to him, it's strange because his nonsense is hard to listen to, let alone understand.
З іншої сторони, коли BBC їде говорити з Лукашенко, от мені якось дуже дивно це виглядає, тому що, здавалося б, цей бред, який він несе, його навіть слухати важко, не те, щоб зрозуміти. Тим не менше, BBC говорить з Лукашенко на саміт BRICS до Путіна.
At the BRICS summit, Putin emphasized that this is all happening in Russia. Let me remind you that the world leaders of developing countries also come, and accordingly they gather around him or at the same table. And I think it would be impossible in any reality to imagine the biggest terrorists, the biggest democracy in the world, and one of the biggest emerging economies sitting side by side and discussing some future prospects in reality. The BRICS summit is taking place from October 22nd to 24th in Russia, which considers it a great achievement. We can already summarize the first results and evaluate the agreements reached.
Вже можемо якісь перші підсумки підбивати того, як це все пройшло, яких домовленостей вони там досягли.
Let's start briefly with the BBC. This is the BBC standard, which seems to allow for a second point of view. But in reality, this is legitimizing a lie, because neither Russia nor Belarus provide a second point of view. They sell only lies under the guise of propaganda. There is no difference, and so on. That is, you provide a platform for the general public, for people who are not ready to distinguish between a point of view and a lie in detail. You provide an opportunity to produce large volumes of lies, to promote them for different social categories in different countries. It's not about the standard of journalism. We need to talk about it frankly, not be afraid to talk about it. Therefore, to give the floor to subjects like Lukashenko, who legitimize, and I emphasize again, lies and legitimize violence as such, is again to add structural elements to the destruction. You see, structural elements to destroy the framework in which we live today. That is the democratic framework. They just have to realize this, and we have to talk about it. This is the first. Secondly, in the 36th year of the last century, there is a wonderful movie, I'm being sarcastic here, called Olympia, which shows how democracies accepted Adolf Hitler absolutely normally, calmly, and sat next to him in the stands of the Great Olympics. This again legitimized the future large-scale concentration camps. What can we say here? Yes, there is a global political process. In this sense, it existed yesterday, it exists today, and it will exist tomorrow. We have to understand this, and again, continue to persistently explain the point of view on the field. If you legitimize evil, sooner or later, it will try to dominate. Now let's move on to the BRICS. To be clear, of course, BRICS does not exist as an alliance today. I want us to be clear, this is all a fiction. This platform is only about intentions, without political and economic unity. It is not a union or an alliance with clear prospects. On the contrary, it is being reformatted, with China coming to the fore and Russia losing its active role.
Китай. Всі розуміють, що Росія, яка була достатньо активна останні 10 років навколо спроби побудувати якусь альтернативу демократичній коаліції, демократичному альянсу, Євросоюзу і так далі.
Today, Russia is using the BRICS to propagate ideas of war. Except for Venezuela and Iran, the countries are not interested in turning the BRICS into a tool for competition with high-tech markets, especially the United States. China and India want to maintain relations with technological countries.
І Китай в цьому не зацікавлений. Чому? Тому що і Китаю, і Індії, безумовно, в стратегічній перспективі вкрай важливо мати...
This means the European Union, Asian countries such as South Korea, Japan, and of course, the United States. That is why we are calm about BRICS. Today, once again, BRICS does not exist as a competitive platform that can be an alternative, for example, economic or economic political. Of course, Russia wanted the Kazan summit to be a promotion of the war as such, and it partially succeeded in doing so by having the UN Secretary General visit the summit, in my opinion. Look, the peace summit is definitely a peace summit with 100 plus countries and organizations present. The UN Secretary General, who is supposed to be in charge of peace as such, is the one who is responsible for the peace summit. And the peace summit is based on international law and the UN Charter documents. At the same time, there is no BRICS summit where Russia is promoting war, i.e. updating the UN Charter documents, but there is. This is a reputational blow to the UN, but it will continue to exist despite the corruption. Russia is using it as a propaganda platform, saying that Putin is not isolated when he is not. Countries are engaging with Russia for economic benefits, but this does not legitimize Putin or bring him back into global political processes. It is the war, not Putin, that is having an impact.
Путін не є ізольованим лідером і не є людиною, з якою не хоче спілкуватися. Ні, він є ізольований. Тому що всі ці країни, вони так чи інакше спілкуються з Російською Федерацією, з Путіним. Це не перший і не останній раз, коли вони спілкуються з Путіним. І вони отримують від Росії те, що вони хочуть в рамках демпінгових, скажімо так, цін. Все, крапка. Але це не є легітимізація Путіна, це не є повернення Путіна до глобального політичного процесу. Абсолютно. Путін не впливає на глобальні політичні процеси. Війна впливає, зрозуміло, тому що війна потребує певних відповідей, які...
That is, they are not given these answers. But at the same time, Putin is not a global player, and the BRICS summit emphasizes this. The second component is an attempt to post a resolution on Ukraine that we allegedly attacked it because there were some risks to our security. Russia is saying that, look, a country, a large-scale military power, is claiming that a small country like Ukraine, Estonia, Lithuania, or Georgia in 2008 wanted to attack Russia. Bullshit is bullshit, and it is sold as bullshit. But in today's world, sometimes people buy bullshit. That is, they're willing to pay money to buy a little bit of bullshit. This is a normal practice, but they tried to push through this resolution again. And what is the result? Nothing, because it doesn't explain two things. First, the outbreak of war. Why did you attack another country in the first place? It does not provide an explanation for this, and legally, they will in any case be considered an aggressor who has violated the territorial integrity of another country. Secondly, this resolution does not affect the processes that we see on the front line today. And finally, the third thing. Again, look, we really like the Sino-Brazilian formula for ending the war, which says, let's stay on a little bit more of these territories. You realize that this formula is not effective. It really doesn't affect anything, because ending the war by leaving the occupied territories in Russia means simply getting an operational pause before the next stages of escalation. Everyone understands this. The issue here is different. I'm going to come to a very short phrase. Political will.
Ну, якщо демократичний альянс все ж таки не знайде десь там, не віднайде, я не знаю, де можна віднайти цю політичну волю колективно, не прийме нарешті ті рішення, які абсолютно чітко фіксує президент.
If the Democratic Alliance fails to find the collective political will and implement the plan to defeat the Ukrainian president, autocratic alliances will only strengthen their influence. War will become a key instrument of foreign policy. And if someone is not afraid of it, in 5 years, large-scale wars may break out in different regions, including Central and Southern Europe.
Робити вигляд, що не боїться цього, це означає, що через 5 років війни будуть масштабні в різних регіонах, в тому числі в Європі.
We have to react calmly to various summits, and I emphasize once again that they do not affect the global political process. Countries want to find a formula, I mean Saudi Arabia, Brazil, and so on. But so far, they also do not understand what it should look like. They have different objectives. If Brazil wants to dominate certain segments, wants to have access to certain markets, then China, India, and Saudi Arabia have completely different intentions. They want to compete. They want to get some opportunities to get around this competition. but to their advantage. Russia sees the BRICS as an instrument of geopolitical pressure and a justification for war, hoping that it will help it to exist for many years to come.
Виключно як інструмент, який може дати надію Росії, що вона в такому вигляді ще може там декілька десятків років існувати.
I have a few current thoughts.
Тобто, в принципі, цю всю історію із країнами, які приїхали на саміт БРІКС, можна назвати як любов за гроші.
This whole story with the countries that came to the BRICS summit can be called love for money. That is, as long as they have some kind of financial component, they seem to be sticking with, supporting, or being close to Putin. Secondly, you said that China does not give Putin the leadership of the BRICS. It turns out that if they hadn't come, Putin would have been the leader. And so they came, talked to everyone, and seemed to be aware of the whole story. The third story is about Guterres. I thought that perhaps Ukraine had given him some requests, wishes, that he should convey to Putin, for example, the positions adopted at the same peace summit, or, in principle, the final word on the peace summit.
Почнемо з останнього. Передавати щось через, скажімо, таких кур'єрів, як Гутеррес, немає сенсу, тому що все в відкритому доступі. Є десятки.
It makes no sense to send something through couriers like Guterres, because everything is publicly available. Many countries are discussing the peace formula and the summit's decisions. Russia is closely monitoring this, but will not respond without significant coercion.
Світосприйняття, вона на це не буде реагувати ніяк. Тобто ви можете передавати це через будь-кого. Ні, Гутеррес туди з'явився тільки для того, щоб все ж таки бути десь поряд, тому що, якось якусь функцію він має виконувати, якісь інформаційні...
Guterres appeared to support the functions of the UN and not to fall out of the global information process. His visit has no significant impact on the war or its end. As the UN Secretary General, he has the right to attend summits, but he should take a more balanced position on the war and the violation of the UN Charter. He should support Ukraine's formula for peace and promote these concepts, but so far he has not done so. We are calm about his actions.
Сам по собі, як генеральний секретар ООН, він має право робити все, що вважає за потрібне. Це його абсолютно суверенне право. І, безумовно, він може бути присутнім на будь-якому саміті. Але, ще раз, логіка сьогодні історичного моменту така, що було бажано, безумовно, генеральному секретарю займати більш виважену позицію щодо війни, щодо порушення статутних документів ООН. Росія саме це робить. Треба було, щоб генеральний секретар, безумовно, підтримав і формулу миру, і саміт миру України, активно наполягав на просуванні цих концепцій. Так далі, але маємо те, що маємо, знову ж таки спокійно відносимось, тому що він реалізує своє суб'єктне право діяти в політичному форматі так, як він діє.
I really like the first part, that you talk about love for money. Of course, today, only Russia can buy something, but only for money. That is, there is no point in communicating with Russia in terms of common interests.
Окрім таких країн, ще раз, як Венесуела, чи там Північна Корея, чи там Іран, зрозуміло, що це країни-ізгої, безумовно, вони залежать від Російської Федерації.
Countries like Venezuela, North Korea, and Iran have limited options and are dependent on Russia. They believe that if Russia does not lose, it will be more confident in its global behavior, providing them with stable support. This will allow them to act more aggressively in their regions, which is already evident in North Korea's behavior.
Абсолютно точно вони зацікавлені в Росії не з точки зору стратегування, не з точки зору геополітичних інтересів, не з точки зору створення якогось альянсу з Російською Федерацією.
Other countries are not interested in Russia from the point of view of strategic or geopolitical interests, because it has little prospects. They are cooperating with Russia through the BRICS to benefit from it. This is a tough pragmatism. If they can monetize relations with Russia, they will do so. This is a normal process that is not Ukraine-centered.
Монетизувати оці стосунки певні в рамках БРІКСу, вони будуть це робити, і це абсолютно, знову ж таки, нормальний процес, тому що, не Україна-центричний, ми вже...
Everyone has repeatedly said that they are using the moment to dump and circumvent sanctions to make money on the reshaping of markets. They will continue to do so.
заробляти шалені кошти, вони це будуть робити.
Now, as for China, on the leadership side, no. China definitely believes that the BRICS and the SCO are two such promising platforms that can be reformatted and fully assume leadership. Leadership used to be shared between China and Russia. But today, China realizes its strategic role, and all countries want to build partnerships with it. China is gaining leadership, while Russia is staying because countries cannot simply tell it to go away.
Вибудовувати це очевидно. Китаю добровільно віддають лідерство і навпаки, не можуть країни сказати: Росія, давай, іди геть звідси, чому? Ми ж тільки що з вами розібрали, що можна на цьому заробляти. І тому Китай, безумовно, приїздить на такі саміти і в основному...
We have just analyzed what can be earned from this. That's why China definitely comes to summits like the SCO or the BRICS in Kazan to emphasize its undisputed leadership. They don't care where the event takes place. They come as leaders. For example, at Xi's meeting with Putin in Kazan, the Russian president was waiting for the Chinese president, which emphasizes their roles. Now let's look at why China wants to speed up certain processes.
Хоче трошки підшвидшити деякі процеси, і вони, в принципі, нейтрально позитивні, як я сприймаю. Дивіться, те, що робить Північна Корея, якщо...
They are basically neutral to positive, as I see it. North Korea has long been under the influence of China, which has lobbied for its interests and solved humanitarian problems, restraining the negative reaction from the EU, the US, Japan, and South Korea.
З боку Європейського Союзу, чи Сполучених Штатів, чи Японії, чи Південної, зрозуміло, Кореї і так далі.
China somehow covered it all up, and so on.
Але Північну Корею це не задовольняє, тому що місія Північної Кореї...
But North Korea is not satisfied with that, because North Korea has only one mission, and you understand it very well. They invested there, which they had little money, and so on. They were building a military country whose purpose is to exist without any other purpose than to start a big, large-scale war in the Indo-Pacific region on the Korean peninsula. This is a kamikaze country. Of course, they want to burn everything they can, burn themselves, and so on. Today, they have the opportunity to quickly migrate towards the Russian Federation, which is ready to finance and support all of this, and so on. And this completely contradicts China's plans. On the contrary, China needs a stable region, as stable as possible. It definitely does not need a war on the Korean peninsula.
І таким чином наносить суттєві збитки інтересам, глобальним інтересам, глобальним.
Today, China must clearly realize that Russia is, on the contrary, pulling North Korea away, forming a potential escalation region, and thus causing significant damage to China's global geopolitical interests. This is just one of the points where Russia has plans that are completely at odds with China's plans.
Китай поступово їх вже починає вважати регіонами пріоритетного розвитку, свого пріоритетного розвитку.
Сі також вчергово сказав про те, що
Today, Russia can be useful to China only for resources and territories, especially in the Far East, which China considers a priority for development. She again emphasized the need to prevent the escalation of the war and its spread to third countries. In particular, one cannot but mention the DPRK, whose military was recently photographed with Russians on Red Square. In the evening, they could find themselves on the territory of Kursk, learning from the experience of Russian officers, not knowing what they would learn, looting or launching drones. The world calls to prevent the escalation of World War III. Putin invites the DPRK military to Russia, saying, "Here is Ukraine, go ahead." South Korea responds by saying it can provide assistance.
Там, не знаю, допитувати можемо їх у разі, якщо вони попадуть до вас в полон, або надати навіть летальну зброю.
I don't know if we can interrogate them if they are captured or even provide them with lethal weapons. We are ready. And here we are again talking about the fact that a war between Russia and Ukraine on the territory between Russia and Ukraine could face North Korea and South Korea, which have the same relationship just on a daily basis on their territories.
Нічого наразі не вказує на те, що вони готові його покарати.
Escalation occurs when the aggressor is not punished, and there are no signs of readiness to punish. If you consider escalation to be a defense of sovereign rights, it requires a psychiatric examination. The aggressor's impunity leads to constant escalation, as Russia continues to be tolerated in its aggression. UN Secretary General attends the BRICS summit organized by the aggressor country. This is an escalation. The globalization of the conflict is an objective development of the situation. Why? It is not countries that are at war, but value alliances. This is a concrete example, not pathos. There is a very clear autocratic alliance with its own goals. There are goals of the Russian Federation. They are global. These goals can be summarized in one word: domination through violence. Obviously, because the Russian Federation cannot continue to sit at the global table as an equal because it gives nothing, adds nothing to humanity. Neither advanced technologies, nor non-progressive profits, nor progressive quality of life, nor humanization of the additional, nor culture. Let me say that again. The Russian Federation wants to sit at the global table, but through violence. That is why Russia's specific goal is domination. Not a loss in the war, but at least the realization of the main mission for which they built this strange country. I'm being sarcastic here because such a country cannot exist either. It generates nothing but aggression, and they want to realize this aggression. Now let's move on to the global conflict. We have a democratic alliance within which Ukraine, unfortunately, is fighting alone. Other countries could fight with us, but in the humanitarian era, it is difficult. The democratic alliance should not only talk, but also increase military production and supply of weapons. We need to pay attention to North Korea's actions, which is important for China, South Korea, and our partners. North Korea understands that the war will be fought in another theater of operations, i.e. on the Korean Peninsula. They realize this because, once again, they have no other sense of the state's existence. They want to burn this state, but they want to burn it together with other states that are nearby. But Korea, look, theoretically it realized that we know how to fight, we will, North Korea, we will fight, and so on. But they realize today, after the start of a full-scale war in Ukraine, that it could end up like with the Russian Federation. Everyone believed that Russia had a super powerful army with extensive experience and high-quality weapons, capable of quickly controlling any territory. However, it turned out that Russia has no experience in modern warfare and does not know how to fight, and has weak coordination and command systems. North Korea also understands this, what it wants. It wants to come to a war zone, kill citizens of another country, and gain this experience at the level of leadership, let's say management units. That is, the people who will be in charge of the North Korean army to gain this experience. And South Korea has to realize that this will be a completely different army in North Korea. And then a possible conflict on the Korean Peninsula will be much more deadly. North Korea will begin to take direct part in hostilities on the territory of Ukraine. We can start counting the days or weeks until another major war on the Korean Peninsula. Again, because this is an objective historical development of processes. It cannot be that you are there. Well, if you turn away from this and it will all be happening somewhere else, it will not. And so coming back today, and the fact that it will happen is unequivocal. As soon as North Korea begins to directly participate in hostilities on the territory of Ukraine, we can start counting the days or weeks until another major war on the Korean Peninsula. Again, because this is an objective historical development of processes. It cannot be that you turn your backs on it and it will not happen somewhere else. It's not going to happen. The conflict today is globalized and concerns alliances, rules of global behavior, and dominance, not just territory between Russia and Ukraine. The statement that the problem can be solved by transferring territories to Russia is wrong. There will be no agreement. The escalation will continue until Russia is punished and forced to lose this war. Similarly, other regimes, such as the North Korean regime, can be made to realize that there will be no umbrella under the guise of the Russian Federation. Last week, during a visit to our partners, the President spoke about our path to NATO and our desire to be invited.
Минулого тижня, перебуваючи там з візитом у наших партнерів, і тепер говорять про те, що ми кажемо про те, що ми хочемо отримати запрошення до НАТО.
We gave up our nuclear weapons, hoping for your help and security, but you did not fulfill this. Then we were supposed to receive NATO protection in exchange for the weapons, but this did not happen. I propose to fix this now. We understand that joining NATO may take time, but we want an invitation to NATO, preferably, I understand, in the near future. And here again, there is an article on Politico that Germany and the United States are not the only ones who are blocking Ukraine's NATO invitation. There are also Hungary, Slovakia, Belgium, Slovenia, and Spain. They are also resisting. That is 7 countries that currently allegedly do not support Ukraine's invitation to NATO. But again, they say that as soon as this process becomes more real, the resistance will be even greater. Let's start with the Budapest Memorandum. Very briefly, let us explain that at that time, Ukraine did not understand what global subjectivity was. Before the full-scale, let's say, invasion of Ukraine by the Russian Federation, we also did not understand what our subjectivity was. We were not present in the global world. We did not exist. Yes, we were engaged in trade, we sold something, we had embassies in different countries, but we were not subjective. Today, when we say that we gave you nuclear weapons, not everyone understands that it was an act of subjectivity. Not everyone understands this, even in Ukraine. Unfortunately, both then and today, this, let's say, readiness to become a subjective entity was not fully proven because there was no such understanding. Today, this understanding is there, and that is why Ukraine speaks quite simply. This is what we were talking about a little bit earlier. We are talking about the legal formalization of alliances. Today, there are democratic and autocratic alliances, as well as neutral countries that observe their struggle. If the democratic alliance wins and international law prevails, the neutral countries will abide by its norms. If the autocratic alliance wins, international law will disappear, and the law of force will prevail, forcing neutral countries to seek new agreements, weapons, and technologies. This is what we are talking about in general, and the President is absolutely right. Let's define and formalize what alliances are. Let's formalize everything. We want to be in an alliance. We cannot be among the neutral countries, of course, because we are at war. We have a specific opponent who will never let us be a neutral country. He will always consider us a territory of influence. Will always want to build some mythical buffer zones here. He hates us and will constantly provoke us, which will destroy your alliance. Ukraine claims that without winning the war, there will be no NATO. Neutral countries will realize who dominates the world today. If the United States and Germany decide to defend their interests, other countries will also change their position, and the discussion will reach a new level.
треба захищати, то тоді інші країни будуть змінювати свою позицію, тому що це буде зовсім іншого рівня дискусія.
When Hungary sees the uncertainty of the United States, it acts in accordance with its pro-Russian interests. This is their sovereign right. The uncertainty of the United States and Germany encourages them to be more aggressive toward Ukraine, blocking its accession to the EU and NATO.
Сполучених Штатів і Німеччини, то тоді вони ведуть себе більш інформаційно агресивно і щодо там позиції по Україні, і щодо блокування можливості вступу в Європейський Союз і НАТО України і так далі.
As soon as Hungary sees a consolidated position of the United States and Germany, their behavior will change, as they are interested in accessing the financial markets and technologies of this alliance. The uncertainty of the key alliance leaders leads to a delay in the process of change. For the last 20 years, it was believed that conflicts would be localized, but now we have realized that this is not the case. However, restructuring is slow because of the bureaucratic processes in democratic countries.
Всі вважали, що в принципі все буде більш-менш по правилах. Тобто якісь конфлікти будуть, але це локальні конфлікти, незначні конфлікти, вони не впливають на розподіл глобальних ролей, які відіграють ті чи інші країни. З'ясували, що це не так, але вони не готові так швидко перебудуватись, тому що це інертний процес, це бюрократичний процес, це колективний процес. На жаль, в країнах демократії дискусія довга, дуже довга. Але вони в цій дискусії сьогодні, дивіться, ми
We have returned to the topic of NATO in a new tone, which is significantly different from the one before the Vilnius summit, when we thought it was impossible. That is, all of this may be a theoretical construct, but almost everyone understands that it is not. In general, Ukraine and NATO are parallel universes. Today, the tone is completely different. Today, it is discussed as a logistical process, a necessary, objective, and possible historical process.
І тому сьогодні інша інтонація, інші дискусії, інші рішення. І ми з вами вже бачимо, що говорять так, може стати.
Today, the tone has changed. New discussions and decisions have emerged. The discussions in an autocratic alliance are faster than in a democratic one, but both are moving towards final decisions. Either the democratic alliance will lose or win. There will be no compromises.
Або ми програємо, я маю на увазі демократичний альянс, або ми виграємо. Там немає компромісних рішень.
Поточнення по НАТО, чи дійсно прямо 7 країн сказали, що вони проти, або...
The question about NATO, did 7 countries really oppose it, or did they just not support it? As for the DPRK troops, there are rumors that they are heading to Kursk, and Putin has allegedly ordered them to return by February 5th. This could be another victory on the 3rd anniversary of the war.
Побєда, повернення в родную гавань Курщини, певно, до 3-ї річниці початку Великої війни?
Putin should clarify by what year he wants to return Kursk by February 5th, because his statements have nothing to do with reality. There is no clear position against or for the 7 countries. These are all discussions. The positions of Hungary and Slovakia are clear, but they may change when Germany and the United States make up their minds. Then the dialogue will rise to a different level. Including at the level of Hungary and Slovakia. Other countries are a matter of discussion and consolidated decisions. We are waiting for consolidated decisions from the United States and Germany, as the President said, then the discussion will change. Regarding Kurdistan and North Korea, I honestly think that we spend too much time on North Korea. First, we have to wait to see how many North Koreans will be there, because it is a heterogeneous army. They certainly say that we have 6.5 million potentially mobilized there, we already have 1.5 million troops there, and so on. But there are some special units that are actually trained, working, constantly staying in certain camps, have a lot of experience, and they have very good ammunition. But there are 50 to 100 of them in the whole of North Korea. I doubt that these people will be directly involved at the level of a large number of people in a war that North Korea does not care much about. So we will see how many people and what kind of people North Korea will send. We will see where they will be localized and how our guys will handle it all. I think they will give extensive comments because our guys are definitely good at fighting. And after that, we will draw certain conclusions. Regarding Putin, it should be emphasized that there is no point in analyzing Lukashenko's words until he gives legal testimony. Then it will be interesting because he will talk about many important things that will be included in the guilty verdicts against the Russian Federation. Lukashenko will tell us exactly how the planning took place, why the territory of the Belarusian foothold was used, and who was there. He will tell us by name what orders came from Moscow, what was offered to Belarus in return, what it received, how much it cost, and so on. This will be a killer testimony for the Russian Federation. It's obvious. As for Putin, he is a person who is not adequate in terms of perceiving reality. He has no information, he can say some general things, fixing his strange positions. Again, we do not see this as a manifestation of adequacy. On the contrary, Putin is not negotiable because he does not live in the real world. You cannot sign specific agreements with such a person because he will wake up the next morning and not remember it. He will have very short-term amnesia. Thank you for that, and we'll keep an eye on what happens in Kursk, how many DPRK troops will actually be there, and whether they will get there or understand what they need to do there. Of course, we will be waiting for the elections in the United States, because I understand that the further agenda depends on them, not only in the Western world among our partners, but also in Russia.
Чекати на вибори в Сполучених Штатах, тому що я так розумію, що від них також залежить подальша повістка в світі.
As I understand it, they are now sitting there waiting to see who will become the next president, with whom to negotiate or not. Accordingly, we are not currently on pause, but it is also very important for us to have a dialogue with the next president. At the same time, Ukraine has no influence on the elections in the United States. We are just waiting for the elections, and that's it. Which of the Democrats will actually win? We would like to thank Presidential Advisor Mykhailo Podolyak for his participation and everyone who was with us on the air. Subscribe to the YouTube channel of Channel 24. Take care and see you soon.